While my cousins were celebrating their millions at my grandfather's funeral, I stood there holding a crumpled envelope with a single plane ticket inside. Everyone laughed at me that day. 6 months later, they were begging for my forgiveness. My name is Nathan Whitmore, and this is how the smallest gift at a funeral turned into the biggest test of my life. The day began like a theater performance. Rows of luxury cars, designer suits, forced tears. My cousins, Preston and Mallory, arrived draped in wealth, smiling through the kind of grief that came with dollar signs. Their parents, Uncle Vernon and Aunt Beatrice, hovered near the lawyer like hawks circling a carcass. Grandfather Roland Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Shipping Industries, had built his empire from one fishing boat. Every person in that room believed they were entitled to a piece of it. Everyone except me. I wasn't there for an inheritance. I was there to say goodbye to the only man who ever believed I was more than my paycheck. When the lawyer began reading the will, gasps filled the room. Preston got the company. Mallory got the yacht. Their parents got beachfront property. Then came my name, a wrinkled envelope, a one-way ticket to Rome. The silence that followed was louder than any applause. Then came the laughter, cruel, echoing off the marble floors of the Whitmore estate. Preston smirked. Guess Grandpa wanted you out of the country, Nate. I tried to laugh too, but as I looked up at my grandfather's portrait hanging above the casket, something in his eyes, even in paint, told me this wasn't a joke. It was an invitation. I didn't open the envelope again until that night. I sat alone in a cheap motel room off the interstate, the funeral suit hanging from the shower rod, the smell of whiskey and rain filling the air. My name was typed neatly on the ticket. Nathan Whitmore, Rome, Italy. The date was for the following week. No letter, no explanation, just that single destination. For most of my life, I'd been the quiet shadow in the Whitmore family. My cousins went to Ivy League schools, groomed for leadership, while I went to community college and became a high school history teacher. I never cared much for money, but I did care about my grandfather. He was the only one who visited me when I got pneumonia senior year, the only one who showed up to my graduation when my parents were too busy. He used to tell me stories about fishing boats that survived storms, about people who lost everything but kept going. You can rebuild an empire, he once said, but not a man who quits on himself. Maybe that was what this ticket was about. A test. Grandpa never believed in easy rewards. He built Whitmore Shipping with his bare hands. One ship, one deal, one sleepless night at a time. He used to joke that if he ever gave anyone an inheritance, it would come with work boots attached. The day after the funeral, I got a call from the family lawyer, Mr. Keating. He said, Nathan, your grandfather's instructions were unconventional, but he was adamant you take that flight. Everything you need will be waiting for you when you land. I asked him what that meant. He just paused and said, sometimes the smallest doors open to the biggest rooms. A week later, I was standing at Denver International Airport with that same wrinkled envelope in my jacket pocket. My cousins had already made headlines. Photos of Preston at the helm of the Whitmore yacht. Mallory at fashion galas talking about legacy. Meanwhile, I was boarding an economy seat on a 10-hour flight to Rome, not knowing a single soul there. The first time I questioned my decision was somewhere over the Atlantic. I stared out the window, watching clouds blur beneath the wings, wondering if Grandpa was laughing from wherever he was. But the doubt started to fade the moment the wheels touched down at Fiumicino Airport. Because there, standing among the drivers holding signs, was a man in a black suit holding one that said, Nathan Whitmore, your grandfather is waiting. My heart nearly stopped. I walked up, my voice shaking. I think you've got the wrong person. My grandfather's gone. The driver smiled faintly. Mr. Whitmore prepared everything before he passed. He said when you arrive, I should take you to him. To him? I whispered. He nodded. He left something for you. Something he said would only make sense here. I didn't understand any of it, but as I climbed into the black Mercedes idling at the curb, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped into my grandfather's final lesson. And Rome, I would soon learn, was not just the destination of my inheritance. It was the beginning of a mystery that would change everything I thought I knew about my family, and about myself. The drive from the airport took nearly an hour. The city unfolded outside the window. Ancient ruins, narrow cobblestone streets, mopeds weaving through traffic. Rome felt alive in a way I couldn't describe. It was chaos wrapped in history, beauty layered with age. Yet, as we moved farther from the center, the air grew quieter, the streets wider. The driver said little until we reached a tall iron gate framed by overgrown vines. Beyond it stood a villa straight out of a dream, cream-colored walls, cracked marble pillars, and ivy crawling up to balconies lined with stone angels. The sign beside the gate read, Villa Solara. This was your grandfather's, the driver said softly. My grandfather's? He never mentioned owning property here. He didn't own it under his name, the man replied. But it's his. As the gates creaked open, I stepped into a world that smelled of olive trees and salt air. Inside, the house was silent except for the faint hum of cicadas outside. The driver handed me a small black envelope sealed with red wax. He said to give this to you once you arrived. I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten note in my grandfather's slanted script. Nathan, some things can't be inherited, they must be found. Go to the study. The chessboard will guide you. My breath caught. The chessboard. Grandpa and I had spent countless hours playing. He always said life was a game of strategy, not strength, that most people lose because they only see the next move, never the board. I followed the marble hallway to the study. The room smelled of cedar and old paper. Dust danced in the sunlight. There, on a massive oak desk, sat a glass chessboard, pieces mid-game, frozen as if he just left it that way. Pinned beneath the white king was another note. The game isn't over. Move the knight to c6. My hands trembled as I adjusted the knight. A faint click echoed from the desk. The top drawer slid open by itself. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages brittle and yellowed. The first entry was dated 1958, decades before I was born. My grandfather had written about someone named Giovanni Moretti, a partner who helped him start his shipping company. But as I read, the entries grew darker. Talk of betrayal, missing funds, and something he called the Roman deal. The last line of the final page sent chills down my spine. If anything happens to me, Nathan must finish what I started. I stared at the words until my vision blurred. How could he have known I'd ever find this? I turned to the driver, who stood patiently by the door. Did he tell you what this means? The man shook his head. Only that once you found the journal, I should take you to meet someone, his old friend. Who? He said you'd recognize him by the 6 words he'd speak. The 6 words, I repeated under my breath. As we left the villa, I looked back at the windows. For a moment I swore I saw a shadow move behind one of the curtains, a tall figure watching us. I told myself it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just an inheritance. This was a game Grandpa had set in motion long before I ever arrived. And now, it was my move. The next morning, the driver returned, waiting by the gate like a shadow that belonged to the villa. He said nothing as I climbed in, only handed me a folded piece of paper. On it was a single address in careful handwriting. Via dei Banchi Vecchi. 42, Rome was bustling when we arrived. Tourists crowding the narrow street. The scent of espresso and rain mixing in the air. The car stopped outside an old bookstore squeezed between 2 tall stone buildings. Its faded sign read, Libreria Moretti. My heart skipped. Moretti. The name from Grandpa's journal. Inside, the shop was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels sacred. Shelves reached the ceiling, stacked with books whose spines had long since forgotten their color. Behind the counter sat an elderly man with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to weigh every second you stood in front of him. You must be Nathan, he said before I even spoke. How did you? He smiled faintly. Roland told me you'd come. He said you'd be confused, maybe even angry. But he also said you'd be the only one brave enough to open the last door. I hesitated. What door? He gestured toward the back room, the one he couldn't open himself. The man led me through a narrow hallway into a small room. There, on a wooden table, sat a steel lockbox. Dust covered it like a burial shroud. On top of it lay a chess piece, a single white pawn. The old man said quietly, Your grandfather left this for you, but he asked me to say something before you open it. He leaned closer, and in a voice so soft it felt almost ghostly, he whispered the 6 words that would change everything. Find the man I once was. The air seemed to vanish from the room. I stared at the box, pulse pounding in my ears. What does that mean? He sighed. Roland wasn't always the man the world knew. Before Whitmore shipping, before the fortune, there were choices he made, mistakes, people he lost. This box holds the truth about that man. My fingers shook as I turned the key left behind in the journal and unlocked it. Inside were old documents, photos, and a small gold pocket watch. When I opened it, a black and white photograph fell out. My grandfather as a young man, standing beside a woman holding a baby. Behind the photograph, in his handwriting, were 4 words. Forgive what I couldn't fix. Tears stung my eyes. The woman in the photo wasn't my grandmother, and the baby wasn't me. Moretti placed a hand on my shoulder. He came to Rome once every year. Always here, always leaving flowers at the same grave. Her name was Isabella. Who was she?
I whispered. His first love, he said softly.
And the child? The one he couldn't save. The room spun. The shipping empire, the fortune, the ticket. None of it was about inheritance. It was about legacy. About regret. When I looked back down at the box, I saw something else tucked beneath the papers. A sealed envelope with my name. I opened it with trembling hands. Nathan, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to face the truth. What I left behind isn't wealth, it's redemption. Follow Isabella's trail. Finish what I couldn't. Then you'll understand what it truly means to be a Whitmore. I closed the letter slowly, realizing that the man I thought I knew, the titan of industry, had spent his life haunted by the man he used to be, and now he'd handed that unfinished story to me. I left the bookstore with the letter trembling in my hand. The words "find the man" I once was echoing like a heartbeat in my head. The Roman air felt heavier now. Every corner, every statue, every whisper of wind felt like a message from him. A man I thought I'd known, but clearly never did. Back in the car, the driver glanced at me through the mirror. "Where to now, Mr. Whitmore?" I looked at the pocket watch in my palm, its second hand ticking steadily, almost guiding me. Then I noticed an engraving on the back I hadn't seen before. Via della Pace, 9. "Take me there," I said quietly. The street was tucked behind a row of cafes. We stopped outside a small flower shop with a faded sign, Fiori di Isabella. My stomach twisted. I didn't even have to ask who it was named after. Inside, a woman in her late 60s looked up from arranging lilies. Her hair was silver, her eyes soft but sharp, the kind of eyes that carried stories too heavy for words. "You must be Nathan," she said in Italian accented English. "You look just like him." I froze. "Like who?" "Roland," she whispered, smiling wistfully. "I worked for him. Many years ago. He came here every spring. Never said much, but he always brought flowers. For Isabella?" She nodded. "For her and the child." The words hit like a punch. "The child?" Her smile faded. "They died in an accident before he left Italy. He blamed himself forever. He said he couldn't face what he'd done." I swallowed hard. "Did he ever mention me?" She walked to the counter and pulled out a small wooden box. "He left this with me. Said to give it to you if you ever came." Inside were a stack of letters, old and brittle, all addressed to Nathan. My name. But they were dated years before I was even born. I opened one. "My dearest Nathan, if fate allows, I hope my grandson bears your name. May he live with the courage I lacked." A chill ran down my spine. Grandpa hadn't named me by coincidence. He'd named me after the child he lost. As I stood there, struggling to breathe, the shopkeeper said, "He told me he wanted his family to remember that love cannot be bought, that what's built on greed always collapses. He said one day you would prove that." Outside, the sky had darkened, thunder rolling across the distant hills. I tucked the letters into my jacket and stepped out, staring up at the heavens as rain began to fall. I realized then what my grandfather had done. The fortune, the ticket, the riddle, none of it was about inheritance. It was about transformation. He wanted me to confront his past, to understand what wealth meant when weighed against guilt, loss, and love. That night, as I returned to Villa Solara, the power flickered. A storm swept across the coast, lightning flashing through the old windows. I lit a candle in the study, staring at the chessboard again. The pieces hadn't moved, but now I saw the pattern differently. He wasn't just teaching me strategy, he was teaching me atonement. The phone in the study rang suddenly, shrill against the thunder. I hesitated, then picked it up. A man's voice on the other end spoke calmly, too calmly. "You found the letters. Good. Then you're ready for the truth. Who is this?" I asked. "The man your grandfather wanted you to meet next." The line went dead, and in that silence I knew Grandpa's game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The storm outside was relentless, but it was nothing compared to the one rising inside me. My grandfather's secrets were no longer buried. They were pulsing through every letter, every clue, every unanswered question. The voice on the phone haunted me. "You're ready for the truth. Who was this man? How did he know about the letters? And what truth could possibly make sense of all this?" The next morning, an envelope was slid under my door. No return address. Just my name written in familiar, careful handwriting. Inside was a single key and a note. "Go to the crypt. Midnight. Come alone." I didn't sleep that day. I couldn't. The villa felt alive with echoes, portraits watching me, the floorboards creaking like whispers. When the clock struck 12, I took a lantern and followed the narrow path to the family crypt at the edge of the property. The stone door groaned as I pushed it open. Cold air rushed out, and the scent of age and dust filled my lungs. My lantern flickered across marble tombs bearing the Whitmore name. Then I saw him, a figure standing by Roland's coffin, half-shadowed, wearing a long black coat. "You came," he said. His voice was the same one from the phone. "Who are you?" I demanded. He turned, stepping into the light. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp and strangely familiar. "My name is Alessandro," he said. "I was your grandfather's business partner, and his greatest mistake." I tightened my grip on the lantern. "You knew him? What do you want with me?" He smiled faintly. "What he wanted, for you to understand why he built all of this. Why he chose you? I don't care about the money," I said. He chuckled. "Good. Because the money was never the prize. It was the test." I frowned. "The test?" Alessandro walked closer. "Your grandfather's empire was built on deception, smuggling routes, offshore accounts. He tried to clean it up before he died, but his partners, myself included, refused to let go. The letter, the ticket, the letters you found, they're breadcrumbs. He wanted you to finish what he couldn't, to burn it all down." I stared at him. "You're saying he was guilty?" "Not just guilty," Alessandro said quietly. "Haunted." I looked at Roland's tomb, remembering his trembling hands the last time we played chess. The way he stared at the board like it held all his sins. "What happens if I refuse?" I asked. "Then his legacy dies in darkness," Alessandro said. "But if you finish what he started, you'll inherit something far greater than money. You'll inherit his redemption." He handed me a flash drive. "Everything you need is here. Names, accounts, operations, expose it. Free him from what he built." I hesitated. "And if I do?" Alessandro gave a grim smile. "Then you'll make enemies. Powerful ones. But you'll also make peace for him and for yourself." Before I could reply, thunder cracked overhead, shaking the crypt. When I looked back, Alessandro was gone, vanished into the shadows. I stared at the flash drive in my palm. It glowed faintly under the lantern light, the modern key to an empire built on secrets. For a long time, I stood there, torn between fear and duty. Then I remembered Grandpa's words. "The most powerful moves are the ones nobody sees coming." I walked out of that crypt knowing exactly what I had to do. If the Whitmore Empire was born in deceit, I would be the one to end it in truth. The next morning, the Roman sun rose like molten gold over the rooftops, bathing the villa in light so beautiful it almost mocked the storm that raged inside me. I hadn't slept. The flash drive sat on the table beside my untouched coffee, as if daring me to open it. When I finally did, the truth hit harder than any inheritance could. My grandfather's empire wasn't just about shipping. Behind the facade of Whitmore Industries lay a network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and deals with people who didn't appear in daylight. There were payments to names I recognized, politicians, contractors, even members of our own family. And one signature appeared again and again. Vernon Whitmore. My uncle, Preston and Mallory's father. I felt my stomach turn. The man who spent his life leeching off Grandpa's success had also been the rot at its center. And now, the fortune my cousins celebrated was tainted by the very corruption that killed my grandfather's peace of mind. I had a choice. Stay silent and safe, or risk everything to expose the truth. I didn't hesitate. For the next 2 days, I went dark, no calls, no emails, no social media. Using Alessandro's files, I pieced together every thread of the operation. I hacked into the Whitmore corporate servers using access codes hidden in the documents. The flash drive contained proof of illegal exports disguised as marine salvage shipments. But that was only the beginning. Then, one night, a message appeared on my laptop. "We know what you're doing. Stop before it's too late. No sender. No traceable source." I slammed the lid shut, heart pounding. Someone was watching. That night, I packed the drive, the letters, and Grandpa's chess set into a duffel bag and took the first train to Milan. From there, I planned to send the evidence to international authorities, but I never made it to the station. As I stepped out of the taxi, 2 men in suits approached. "Mr. Whitmore?" one asked, too politely. "Who's asking?" They didn't answer. They just moved fast. I ran. The streets were slick from rain, the air heavy with the smell of exhaust and tension. I darted through narrow alleys, boots splashing through puddles, heart slamming like a drum. One of them shouted, "You don't know what you're doing, Nathan! You're going to ruin everything." Good, I thought. That meant I was close. I turned a corner and found myself in a dead end. My hands tightened around the duffel. I could hear footsteps closing in. Then, just as one man reached for me, a black car screeched to a halt between us. "The back door swung open. Get in!" a voice yelled. I didn't think. I just dove inside. The car sped off before the door even shut. When I looked up, Alessandro was behind the wheel. His face was pale, jaw clenched. "I told you they'd come," he said. "Who are they?" I gasped. "The ones who don't want your grandfather's sins exposed," he said. "They've got eyes everywhere, but we still have a move left." He slammed a small leather case into my lap. "That's your backup. The drive's clone. If they take the original, this still gets out." We sped through the wet streets of Milan, headlights streaking through the darkness. My pulse throbbed in my ears as Alessandro's voice cut through the roar of the engine. "Your grandfather didn't just build an empire, Nathan. He built a trap, and you're the only one who can spring it." The words hit me like lightning. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just revenge or justice. This was destiny, a final game of chess between Roland Whitmore and the demons he left behind. And I was holding the last move. 3 days later, the world stopped pretending. Every major news outlet, from CNN to the BBC, flashed the headline across their screens, "Whitmore shipping exposed in global smuggling scandal." The documents Alessandro and I sent to international authorities detonated like a bomb. Millions in untraceable transactions, secret trade routes, payoffs to government officials, and right at the center of it all, Vernon Whitmore. My uncle's face filled every news broadcast. He tried to deny it, of course, claimed it was all a forgery and a plot by jealous relatives. But the evidence was overwhelming. The files contained voice recordings, wire transfers, even handwritten notes in his own script. The Whitmore Empire, the dynasty built over half a century, was collapsing overnight. And yet, as I sat in a small apartment overlooking the Colosseum, I didn't feel victory, just an empty ache, because what came next wasn't triumph, it was war. Within hours, my phone exploded with messages, anonymous numbers, threats, demands, then one that froze my blood. "You think this ends with Vernon? You've just made yourself the target, Nathan." I stared at the screen, pulse hammering. Before I could reply, there was a knock on my door. 3 sharp taps. I froze. Alessandro was supposed to meet me in the morning, not now. Slowly, I reached for the kitchen knife on the counter and stepped toward the door. "Nathan," a familiar voice said quietly. "It's me. It was Mallory, my cousin." When I opened the door, she was drenched from the rain. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her usual arrogance was gone. She looked terrified. "They're after you," she whispered. "After all of us." I pulled her inside, locking the door behind her. "Who?" She shook her head. "Dad's partners. The ones who made everything happen. They think you have more files. They're desperate. Do you?" I asked. Her eyes met mine. "Do you?" I didn't answer. She took a shaky breath. "I thought Dad was just greedy. I didn't know it was this bad. They've frozen the accounts. The company's gone. Preston's hiding in Dubai, and Mom, she hasn't stopped crying since the news broke." I wanted to feel sympathy, but I couldn't. "You all laughed at me at that funeral," I said quietly. "You mocked me for one plane ticket. Now look where it led." Tears welled in her eyes. "You think I don't hate myself for that? Nathan, please. I didn't come here for forgiveness. I came to help. Grandpa left something else for you. Something hidden." She handed me a small rusted key, the kind that looked centuries old. I found it inside his chessboard. My heart skipped. "The one I took?" "No," she said. "His original board. The one he never let anyone touch." I turned the key in my hand. On its handle, engraved in tiny letters, were 2 words. "Final move." Before I could ask, a car screeched outside. Headlights flooded the room. Mallory's voice trembled. "They found us." The door exploded inward. 2 men in black stormed in, guns raised. I grabbed Mallory and dove behind the sofa as glass shattered. A bullet ripped through the lamp, plunging the room into chaos. "Run!" I yelled, grabbing the duffel with the drive. We bolted for the back door and sprinted into the rain-soaked alley. Tires screeched behind us. Mallory gasped, "Where are we going?" to finish what Grandpa started. We disappeared into the maze of Roman streets, the sound of engines closing in. The key burned like fire in my pocket. Whatever final move meant, it was waiting for me, and I was ready to play it. The rain followed us all the way to the outskirts of Rome. Mallory and I hid inside an abandoned chapel overlooking the hills, a relic from another century, half-eaten by ivy and time. My pulse was still racing, but in my pocket, the small iron key felt heavier than ever. Mallory sat against the wall, shivering. "They won't stop," she whispered. "I know," I said quietly, "but I think Grandpa left something that can." I set the lantern on the floor and studied the key again. Final move. It wasn't just a phrase, it was his obsession. Every chess game we'd ever played ended with him smiling and saying those same words, almost like a ritual. I turned to Mallory. You said you found this in his chessboard. Where? There was a compartment underneath, she said. Locked. I didn't open it. I didn't have time. My mind started spinning. The board was carved from marble, right? She nodded. Then it wasn't just decoration. It was a map. We tore through the duffel bag, searching through the files until I found the photos of Grandpa's private study. There it was, his chessboard, still sitting on the mahogany table. But something I'd never noticed before made my breath catch. The board wasn't aligned north to south like a normal game. It was tilted, toward the east-facing window, east. The direction of the old Whitmore crypt. Of course, I muttered. He always said the endgame is about what you sacrifice. We drove through the storm until we reached the crypt again. My hands trembled as I pushed open the stone door. The lantern's light spilled across the marble tombs. The same place I'd met Alessandro. But this time, I wasn't alone. We found a plaque at the back, half covered in dust. It read, "For those who seek the truth, not the treasure." Below it was a small brass lock. The key fit perfectly. As it turned, a compartment slid open with a soft click. Inside was a single letter and a USB drive, wrapped in silk. Mallory leaned close. "What is it?" I opened the letter. The handwriting was unmistakably Roland Whitmore's. "Nathan, if you are reading this, it means you've seen the truth. You know what our name was built on. I never wanted you to inherit my sins, only my chance to fix them. I used this company to give your cousins wealth, but I left you the one thing they never had. Freedom. You are the only one who can end the Whitmore legacy cleanly. The files on this drive expose everything, even the ones Alessandro couldn't face. When the world learns what we've done, every account, every offshore fund, every corrupt partnership will fall. Do this, and you'll destroy the empire, but you'll save our family's name." My final move wasn't money. It was you. I lowered the letter slowly, my throat tight. Mallory's eyes filled with tears. He planned this for you." "No," I said softly. "For us. He wanted one of us to finally break the cycle." Behind us, thunder cracked again, and in the distance, sirens echoed. They'd found us. I pocketed the USB drive. "We finish this now." We raced back to the car, mud splashing beneath our boots. My hands shook as I plugged the drive into my laptop. The files loaded, bank accounts, contracts, offshore names, even evidence of bribery linked to powerful officials. Mallory's breath hitched. "If you leak this," I nodded, "they'll lose everything." I hit send. The screen flashed, upload complete. Outside, the storm broke, lightning splitting the sky open like a curtain tearing apart. Grandpa's final move wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. And as the rain finally stopped, I realized he'd taught me one last lesson. Sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't wealth. It's the courage to burn it all down. It's been 6 months since the Whitmore empire crumbled. The story went global. Vernon Whitmore and several partners were indicted on charges of fraud, smuggling, and tax evasion. Preston's assets were seized. The family name, once a symbol of prestige, became a headline for scandal. And me? I walked away from it all. I sold the villa, donated most of what little was left, and moved to a quiet town in southern Italy where no one recognized the Whitmore name. Some days, I still wake up expecting another threat, another knock on the door. But it's quiet here. Peaceful in a way my family never understood. Mallory visits sometimes. She's different now, humbled, trying to rebuild her life without the lies and luxury that once defined it. She says Grandpa would be proud. Maybe she's right. I still keep his chess set on my table. The marble board, now empty, catches the morning light just right. I run my fingers across the cold squares and remember his voice. The most powerful moves are the ones nobody sees coming. He was right. Because while everyone else fought for money, Grandpa's real legacy was a second chance, for all of us to choose integrity over greed. Sometimes, when the wind sweeps through the olive trees outside my window, I swear I can hear his soft chuckle again. Not the booming laugh of a tycoon, but the quiet satisfaction of a man who finally played his last move perfectly. And as I sip my coffee and stare at the chessboard, I realize he didn't leave me a plane ticket to Rome. He left me a way home.